Welcome to Hooked on Enduro. Let's take a look back at the Lonestar Enduro. It's a long drive from Wyoming down to northern Texas. When you roll into the state, it's flat, vast farmland, the kind of place where you look around and think, boy, you could watch your dog run away for days out here. And as you get a little closer to the race start, you really start to wonder where on earth they're even going to hold a race out here with everything being so flat like this. And then you drop down into a valley that leads to where the race is held, and it's a lot more variety to the area. The race day started with a really cold and early riders meeting. The thermostat on my bike was reading about 37 degrees. I was a little anxious going into the race, seeing as that I hadn't really been on my bike more than twice this whole winter. It's been really snowy, and when it's not been snowy up here, it's been really muddy, and it makes a little nervous going into a race with hardly any practice. Test 1 was mostly fast and flowy with a mix of some tighter sections. My time off the bike really showed, as I was really struggling to get into a rhythm and kept making mistakes. I did start to settle in and started to build some momentum. I typically get really bad arm pump in the first test or two of most races, but I think with all the cardio that I've been doing with this program has made a big difference, because I didn't end up having any issues with arm pump. Test 2 was another fast and flowy test. It had a really enjoyable rhythm to it. At this point in my race, the moisture in the air had started to turn into a little bit of a light drizzle. It wasn't enough to keep the dust down at all, but it did make the dust stick to your goggles and GoPro extremely well. My riding was really rusty and I kept making mistakes. I wish I could blame it on the poor visibility, but I think the lack of practice had a lot more to do with that. Test 3 started to get a bit more technical. We started to get into tighter areas as well as sand washes. I tried to push harder in the tighter technical sections since I knew I was going to be losing time in the sand washes. I just don't get enough practice in deep sand, and there's a big difference between being able to ride deep sand and being fast and fluid in it. Test 4 was another fast and flowy test. Thankfully the moisture was starting to let up, which made it a lot easier to start pushing harder and pick up the pace. It's amazing the difference that clear vision makes in your mental head game. Test 5 started in the same place as Test 1, but it only shared a couple hundred feet of the same trail before it diverted down a different path. Test 5 shared a lot of the same type of flow that Test 1 did for the first part of it, before it started getting into a lot deeper sand, a lot more sand washes, and then it kept going back and forth between being fast and flowy and then deep sand, and even some of the sections of single track also had quite a bit of soft sand in it. Test 6 was much the same as the two prior tests, but at this point I was starting to feel the fatigue a lot more. My hands were starting to ache. I pushed through it and tried not to drop too much pace. Test 7, I tried my best to push the pace in all the hard pack trail I could, because I knew I was losing time in the deep sand and silty sections. When the test ended, I was really ready to be done riding for the day. It was a great ride, and I felt I'd ridden fairly well, all things considered, but 68 miles was good enough for the day. I felt that this race made a great way for me to see where I was at to start the season. I felt like all the exercise I've been doing really was paying off, but I could definitely tell the precision in my riding was not as dialed in as it was at the end of last season. I was awarded the first place finish in the B30 plus class, which felt great, but the other racers in my class put up times that were very competitive. I only had the fastest times in Test 6 and 7, which was surprising due to the fact that I was feeling fatigued in Test 7 with all the deep sand and silt and sand washes. I felt I really struggled to put in any real speed in those sections. But they were just enough to push me over the second place position. There were some other racers that didn't finish due to whatever reason, whether that was injury or mechanical issue. But the times they put in were fast. So it was exciting to be awarded a first place finish, but I expect the racing this season only to get tighter, and it's going to get harder to be on the podium. It's a great way to start the season, but I know we've got a lot of work to do to get where we want to.